Good morning, everyone. This is Debbie Royce, Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation's Corporate Secretary. I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's meeting. Before we formally begin, I would ask that everyone please mute your lines unless you're speaking. We'll begin today by taking a roll call of the directors to ensure we have a quorum present on the line. Please be so kind as to say present when you hear your name. Chairman Robert Joya.
Present.
Julie Barnese.
Yes, here.
Shatora Donovan.
Present.
Connie Lyden.
Present.
Mike Vogel.
Present.
And was Macau Matua able to join us today? Or County Executive Mark Poloncarz? Or Mayor Brown? Okay, thanks everybody so much for joining today. And Chairman Joya, you're ready to begin.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning, everyone. I now call to order the meeting of the directors of the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation for Monday, December 13th, 2021. Before we get started, I will ask that everyone please mute their phone until they're ready to speak. Also, for the record, I would ask that anyone wishing to speak, please be sure to state your name before you begin. I'd like to note for the record that in accordance with recently passed legislation, this meeting will be conducted by teleconference. I will also note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on the agenda by submitting their written comments by 4:30 p.m. on Friday. I'd like to state for the record that no comments were received from the public concerning today's agenda items. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions of any time. Before we begin the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the agenda items. If so, I would ask that you please make the appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. Hearing none, I would like to call upon Mr. Rinaldi to present the first item on today's agenda, a request for the corporation to amend its management agreement in connection with the public space of Canalside. Steve, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Robert, and good morning, everybody. A little background on the item here. In January of 2017, the board authorized ECHDC to enter into a 5-year contract with BR Guest to provide public space management services at Canalside. This included a management fee and capital budget for the first 2 years of the agreement in an amount to not exceed $2.9 million. And then in March of 2019, the board authorized a management fee and capital budget for years 3 through 5 in an amount not to exceed $7.4 million. Today, we're returning to the board requesting authorization to exercise our option in the management agreement and extend the term for an additional 2 years, which would be years 6 and 7. In addition, I just want to note that we do intend to amend the agreement to include the 2 surface parking lots located at Perry Boulevard and Commercial Pearl Streets. These are currently under construction, and they will be turned over to as part of the management premises for a limited time prior to the Heritage Point development opening. It was back in 2016 that we issued a request for proposals for the public space management contract. We did this in the New York State Contract Reporter and received a total of 2 proposals. They were reviewed and scored before we brought that to the directors, at which point BR Guest was selected. The BRG team will continue to be responsible for operations and maintenance, programming and event management, marketing and sponsorship, food and beverage management, and financial management of Canalside. We've worked closely with BR Guest on operations and events, sales and marketing initiatives, and we review their financials regularly. They've maintained our standards for site cleanliness, security, customer service, operations, aesthetics, program and event management, as well as carry out the branding and marketing of the site. And they've done, frankly, a tremendous job adjusting as the site has changed, dealing with everything from annual construction projects, of course, to the impacts of COVID over the last couple of years. The management agreement amendment, which constitutes the optional extension on the original contract, will be again for 2 more years. This will begin on April 1st of 2022 and end on March 31st, 2024. We've re-examined the management fee at this point based on the changes to the site, as well as our evolving programming goals. And this time we expect that the amendment will be completed by Be Our Guest not to exceed $2.5 million, bringing their total contract amount to $9.9 million. The funding source shall be the New York Power Authority relicensing agreement. ESD's non-discrimination and contractor and supplier diversity policy will apply to this contract. The policy goals shall include a minority business enterprise participation goal of 15% and a women business enterprise participation goal of 15% related to the total value of our funding. ESD staff has determined that the requested approval for this amendment, which involves continuing operations, programming, and maintenance of canal-side public spaces, constitutes a Type 2 action as defined by seeker and the implementing regulations of the New York State DEC. No further environmental review is required in connection with this authorization. The directors are requested to make a determination of responsibility with respect to the proposed consultant, authorize the corporation to enter into an amendment of the management agreement with Be Our Guest for an amount not to exceed $2.5 million or total contract amount not to exceed $9.9 million, and to take all related actions. Based on the foregoing, I recommend approval of the requested actions. Robert?
Thank you, Steve. I would like to remind everyone to please state your name before speaking. Are there any questions or comments from the directors regarding this item? Hearing none, as noted, we do not have any questions from the public. I will now entertain a motion for approval.
Mike Vogel, so move.
Second?
Second, this is Julie Barnese.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Are any opposed? Hearing none, thank you. The motion carries. Steve will now present a request for the corporation to enter into a project partnership agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in conjunction with the Buffalo District Outer Harbor Slip number 3. Steve?
Thank you, Chairman. Since 2018, we have planted over 1,000 new trees, shrubs, and grasses on the Outer Harbor to diversify the plant species and increase the seedbed that supports the upland habitat. This is migrating and nesting birds, bees, and butterflies. At the Lakeside Bike Park, we planted 5 acres of new habitat while safeguarding an existing 10-acre meadow that surrounds the southern side of the Bell Slip. The Terminal B project, which is now under construction, will add 4 more acres of newly planted meadow, butterfly garden, and bluff area. To date, these habitat improvements at the Outer Harbor have all been on land. However, for this next project, we'll partner with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to create nearly 7 acres of in-water, shoreline wetland habitat to strengthen the aquatic ecosystem of Lake Erie and to enhance the resiliency of the Outer Harbor shoreline. During our Outer Harbor planning process of the last few years, we submitted a request to partner with the Army Corps to address an ecosystem restoration and storm protection project at slip number 3. This is the slip located between Wilkeson Point and the Michigan Pier. Army Corps accepted our request and entered into a federally funded feasibility study, which resulted in the issuance of a detailed project report and environmental assessment in July 2020. This report and environmental assessment were incorporated into our Outer Harbor Land Use and Civic Improvement General Project Plan adopted by the board in November of 2020. The recommended project would create a coastal wetland habitat within the slip, including the construction of a rubble mound breakwater structure at the mouth of the slip to contain the placed dredge material and protect this area against extreme storms and lake sash events. Construction of this breakwater could begin as early as late next year. The placement of approximately 285,000 cubic yards of dredge material from the Buffalo River will raise the bottom of the slip. And these dredge cycles of the river occur every 2 years, with the first scheduled in 2023 and the final one by 2028. Then the installation of gravel beds, rock piles, root wads, logs, and the preservation of existing dock piles would allow for a habitat complexity that can support spawning and nursing by multiple fish species, including the threatened lake sturgeon and muskellunge. Finally, the planting of native species of submerged and emergent aquatic vegetation will provide a high-quality habitat for these aquatic species, while also further supporting migratory and resident bird species. Upon completion of the construction documents, the Army Corps will procure a contractor to construct the rubble breakwall at the mouth of Slip 3. This will be followed by the placement of fill from multiple dredge cycles from the Buffalo River, and once the materials have been placed and settled, the aquatic vegetation will be planted within the slip. Finally, these plantings will be monitored by the Corps for several years to ensure adequate establishment. As a non-federal sponsor, ECHDC is committed to provide not less than 35% of the total construction budget, including the final design fee, and the Army Corps has a federal statutory limitation of $10 million. Based on the current Army Corps construction budget, our total commitment over the course of the project will be $4,971,750. And again, this is estimated over the 10-year project. The board previously approved $451,150 to commence the design phase. That was back in March of this year. This board action seeks approval to enter into a project partnership agreement with the Army Corps for the remaining funding allocation of $4,520,600 to complete the construction and monitoring of the project. The funding source shall be the New York Power Authority relicensing agreement. Participation goals on this federal aid contract will be applied to the Federal Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and will be managed by the Army Corps. The ECHDC directors made a determination of no significant effect on the environment for the general project plan for the Buffalo Outer Harbor Civic and Land Use Improvement Project back in November of 2020, as I mentioned earlier. Among the considerations going into this determination were analyses conducted for the Corps' detailed project report and environmental assessment, and its subsequent federal finding of no significant impact, which they issued in July 2020. ECHDC's environmental review in November of 2020 addressed all aspects of the Buffalo Outer Harbor Civic and Land Use Improvement Project, including the construction work at Slip 3. Therefore, no further environmental review is required in connection with this action. The directors are requested to, 1, authorize the corporation to enter into an agreement with the United States Department of the Army, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in accordance with the above. 2, to authorize expenditure of ECHDC's share to fund construction and monitoring of the project in an amount not to exceed $4,520,600, and to authorize the corporation to take all related actions. Based on the foregoing, I recommend approval of the requested action.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions or comments from the directors regarding this item?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Vogel, question. Are we confident or are we asking the Corps to review their rubble breakwater designs to ensure that they would be adequate considering the increased storm severity we're having out on the Outer Harbor? I ask because the Corps is currently using 11-ton boulders to protect in the 1826 Lighthouse Pier, and despite all of that, we still took major damage during Saturday's windstorm out at Lighthouse Point. So I just want to be sure that we have adequate protection against storm waves and surge there.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, again, I can certainly circle back with Army Corps, but they've been studying this site along with the improvements being made to the Outer Harbor breakwalls. So, I mean, we're really almost a second line of defense behind that breakwall you're referring to. But, you know, we've got confidence in the design that they have, but I will certainly have staff reach out to them before any construction begins.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, Connie Lyden.
Yes, ma'am.
As part of our agreement with the Corps, will a plan for educational outreach be included, as we had discussed at our meeting on site?
Yes, absolutely, Connie. We, as we discussed on site a little over a month or so ago out there, we will ensure that we have educational signage at several locations around the slip during the construction process, and we'll continue to talk about how to both interpret it and explain it to the public after it's open.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And as noted, there were no comments from the public regarding this item, so now I will entertain a motion for approval.
Mike Vogel, so move.
Connie Lyden, seconded.
Thank you. Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. The item is carried. Steve, will please continue and present the request to adopt a pre-qualified real estate development and planning related consultants list for use by the corporation.
Thank you, Robert. Among its many functions, Empire State Development and its subsidiaries, including Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, continue to implement or facilitate a number of large and complex economic development projects and initiatives. In order to enable the corporation to respond to the needs of these projects expeditiously, staff requires a list of pre-qualified firms. ESD staff conducted a broad solicitation of interested real estate and planning firms, reviewed the submissions, and compiled a list of pre-qualified firms. ESD's board of directors adopted the list. This is included in Attachment A on September 14th, 2021, and it is now recommended for adoption by the subsidiary, and it is recommended that this list remain in effect for 4 years. Furthermore, I just want to note that no individual firm is being recommended at this time for retention in connection with any particular matter, and no funding is being authorized. Rather, only a pre-qualified list is being approved. It was on May 13th of 2021 that staff placed an advertisement in the New York State Contract Reporter requesting proposals from real estate development and planning related consultants with expertise in a number of practice areas. I won't go through all of those. 85 firms responded to the solicitation. The responses were evaluated by committees consisting of 3 reviewers assigned to each individual practice area, including staff from the following departments: it was real estate, economic analysis and research, and the loans and grants department. And staff from multiple ESD offices were also included to evaluate from a regional representation standpoint. Based on the review of the materials, ECHDC staff recommends approval of the firms listed on Attachment A to these materials as pre-qualified firms to the corporation in the indicated areas of expertise. This will permit us to respond to project needs efficiently in these various practice areas. ESD staff has examined the responsibility of each of the firms proposed for inclusion on the pre-qual list. Staff concludes that each of the firms proposed is a responsible vendor and recommends that the directors make a finding of responsibility with respect to them. The ECHDC directors are not being asked to authorize the retention of any firm in connection with any matter. Instead, the requested approval would serve to make available to the corporation a panel of candidate firms that have been through a broad solicitation process and determined to meet qualification standards. Going forward, when the need for outside consultants arises in connections with a particular project or initiative, staff can conduct a limited competitive solicitation among the pre-qualified firms and select one or more to recommend to the directors for retention in connection with that particular project or initiative. ESD staff recommends that the pre-qualified list remain in effect for 4 years. ESD staff has determined that the requested authorization constitutes a Type 2 action as defined by seeker and the implementing regulations of the New York State DEC. No further environmental review is required in connection with this authorization. Therefore, staff recommends and the directors are requested to approve the firms on Attachment A to these materials as pre-qualified firms in the areas of expertise identified in such attachment. Robert?
Thank you, Steve. Any questions or comments from the directors regarding this item? Since there were no comments from the public regarding this item, I will now entertain a motion for approval.
Mike Vogel, so move.
Second?
Shatora Donovan?
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Steve will now present the final item on today's agenda, authorization to, among other things, recommend the adoption of the modified general project plan for the Canal Side Land Use Improvement Project. Awful. Steve, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Robert. Before I go through this materials, I did want to note that they still have draft printed on them. I've spoken with Corporate Secretary Debbie Royce, and she has confirmed that these are in fact final materials. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention and just make sure it'll be corrected in the corporate record. With that, let me just go through some background here about this item. You know, the original general project plan for the Canal Side Land Use Improvement Project was adopted back in 2009. And the GPP included, as part of its plan, the development of a major big box retail store on the northern portion of the Odd Block. When that retailer withdrew from the project in 2010, ESD and ECHDC adopted a modified general project plan to address the project in phases. That 2010 modified GPP provided for the construction of a series of canal features following the original alignment of the Erie Canal, the Hamburg Canal, and the commercial slip. Subsequent modifications in 2012, 2013, and 2018 included the Harbor Center development, as well as a public-private development scenario on the South Odd Block that has resulted in the Explore More Children's Museum opening and the soon-to-open Heritage Point mixed-use development. This current modification of the Canal Side GPP describes the build-out program of the North Odd Block, which is based on the preferred concept plan developed in early 2020 after considerable stakeholder and public input. This modified general project plan also describes other modifications in the project area, including the inclusion of the Buffalo Heritage Carousel on parcel E1, as well as revisions to the canal side design guidelines, the overall project investment, and the future of land ownership. However, the primary purpose for the modified project remains the same. It is expected that the project will redevelop a blighted area of the city by transforming it into a vibrant, transit-oriented, mixed-use development that will attract year-round activities, attract visitors, and generate substantial private economic development activity. Since the original general project plan in 2009, a significant amount of public and private investment has been made in the project area. Given this progress and the development of a community-supported plan for the North Odd Block, staff recommended a comprehensive rewrite of the current modified general project plan to better identify accomplishments, the work currently underway, and what remains in future phases. This modified GPP follows the current ESD format while incorporating much of the previous language to provide the board and the general public with a concise and current overview of the project. As already noted, the primary purpose of the modified project remains the same. The modified GPP has been provided as an attachment to these materials. The modifications include the development of the North Odd Block, the opening of a carousel roundhouse, revisions to the design guidelines, updating the overall project investment, the sources and the uses, as well as the operations and maintenance budget, and clarifying land ownership. On the North Odd Block, also known as Parcel A1, has remained unplanned since our changes back at the end of 2009, early 2010. Now, this vacant, nearly 2-acre parcel will include a mix of retail, restaurants, office space, residential units, hotel uses, and structured parking within several buildings that will acknowledge portions of the 19th century street grid while allowing for the site to blend into the current 21st century surroundings and infrastructure. The development program includes nearly 425,000 square feet across several buildings, with an assumed 200 residential units, commercial and retail spaces, office and operations space for ECHDC, and up to 450 parking spaces located in a structured ramp that would be constructed both below and above grade. For the Buffalo Heritage Carousel, now located on a portion of parcel E1, this is just about a 0.2 acre site along the southern end of the Central Wharf, bookending the Great Lawn with the other cultural facilities at the Long Shed and anchoring this great public space. Having reviewed over $250 million in public and private capital improvements at Canalside, the Design Review Committee recommended edits and additions to the Canalside design guidelines to clarify the intent, update images and figures to reflect the current project plans, and to improve the review process. Specifically, all references to Bass Pro have been removed, and the North Odd Block development parcel has been modified in both text and images to reflect multiple buildings as opposed to a single structure. A definition for balconies has been added, and the review process now includes submissions at both 50% and 100% plans. The revised Canalside design guidelines are included in the modified GPP as Exhibit B. The overall investment at Canalside has increased significantly from the anticipated nearly $295 million back in 2009 to the currently expected $708 million. The original GPP anticipated nearly $141 million in private development, which versus the public investment of $109 million. So it was just a little over a 1-to-1 rate of return on that. The current GPP expects over $750 million in private development, showing a rate of 1 to 4 rate of return on the public investment, which we now expect to cap out around $137 million. The annual operations and maintenance budget of nearly $2.4 million in the 2009 GPP has been reduced to $1.3 million in the modified GPP. And the ECHCC no longer anticipates acquiring control of all parcels within the Canal Side project area as described in the original GPP. However, it is expected that we will acquire control of parcel D2 from the city to help complete this parcel's development. And it's also anticipated that ECHDC and the city will transfer property between the commercial Pearl Street right-of-way and parcels A1 and A3 in order to maximize the development of the North Odd Block while ensuring the integrity of the city's street network. ESD, as lead agency, completed an environmental review of the Canal Side project pursuant to the requirements of SEQR and the implementing regulations of the New York State DEC. This review, which was coordinated with all involved agencies due to the project's Type 1 classification, involved a full public scoping process and the preparation of a draft generic environmental impact statement and then a final general environmental impact statement. The ESD Board of Directors issued SEQR findings for the project back in March of 2010. Those 2010 SEQR documents included a full assessment of a preferred alternative that involved the anticipated level of development that was presented in that 2010 modified GPP. In accordance with SEQR regulations and the threshold set in the final generic environmental impact statement, to date, ESD has evaluated the potential environmental effects of those 4 prior modified GPPs. Accordingly, ESD staff has also conducted an evaluation of potential effects of this modified GPP against those documented in the 2010 SEQR documents. This evaluation determined that the assessments and proposed mitigations contained in the 2010 documentation would still adequately address any projected impacts of the development under this modified GPP. Therefore, no further environmental review is required in connection with this action. Therefore, the directors are being asked to, 1, recommend that the Empire State Development Board of Directors adopt the modified GPP, to authorize a public hearing on the modified GPP pursuant to the act and in accordance with other applicable laws, and 3, authorize all related actions. Based on the foregoing, I recommend approval of the requested actions. Robert?
Thank you, Steve. Any questions or comments from the directors regarding this item?
Mr. Chairman, Connie Lyden.
Yes, ma'am.
Steve, I have a question. I think possibly you may have just transposed numbers. On the bottom of page 5, you read the current MGPP expects over $750 million in private development, but what is written is $570 million.
Yes. The written materials are correct. I believe I missed.
Is correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? And as noted, no, there were no public comments for this item. So now we'll entertain a motion for approval.
Mike Vogel, so move.
Thank you. Second.
Lyden.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. I want to thank everyone for your participation today. And before I call a motion to adjourn, I would like to take this opportunity to extend to all and your families warmest wishes for a healthy and happy holiday season. And if there's no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mike Vogel, so move. Seems to be my job today.
Perfect. We couldn't have done it without you, Mike. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy your holidays, and thank you for your participation today.
Merry Christmas, all.
Merry Christmas all as
Thanks.
well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Merry Christmas.